The iceberg syndrome. What is the iceberg syndrome? Well, that's a very well and used concept that's been used in many platforms in many situations. But we often use it in the chiropractic sphere because we often get patients who come into us who are in a crisis point. They cannot move their bodies. Their back have locked. It's seized. And they don't know how it happened. And sometimes their back have locked simply by just reaching out to pick up a knife, and suddenly the back snaps or it seizes and you cannot move. Similarly, it can happen when you're having a shower and you're just gently turning your neck in the shower to reach the soap. And again, your muscles seize and go into spasm. And they come in to see me and they say, "Tone, how did this happen? I don't understand. I wasn't digging, I wasn't doing heavy-duty DIY in my garden or in my house, but suddenly my back in this state. I want to understand, how did this happen?" And we try to then sit down and talk to them and unravel why they are in the state they are and how it happened. So sometimes we have to go back a few weeks, and sometimes we have to go back a few months or a few years. And what tends to happen with the iceberg syndrome is that in today's society, and I believe this belongs very much back to the Victorian era, you are not allowed to be in pain. You are not allowed to grumble. And it still has a hangover effect from those days. Also, we're also being taught not to listen to what our body tells us. So when you have an ache or a pain or a stiffness, what we tend to do is to ignore it. Never mind, it'll be better tomorrow. Never mind, it will be better tomorrow. And we also do something which I believe, and I've called the putting the lid on. So you imagine you having a box, and every time you have a niggle or an ache or it hurts somewhere, you just put it in the box and put the lid on. And what happens then is that the niggles will fill up, and the aches and pains over the years will fill up, and eventually it will just burst open. And it's exactly the same with your iceberg syndrome. So you can have aches and pains that you ignore, and you have tiredness, and you have stresses, and you have strains in your life. And suddenly the tip will just come across the level. And you will not understand how it happened because you haven't been paying attention to how it has been built up. So that's when people start to go, "I see, okay, I get it." And they start to put a line between the dots. So what often happens is that you may have a car accident at some point, and then you just cope with it and ignore the symptoms and get on with it. And then you learn to live with the stiffness that you think you just have to live with, but you don't realize that maybe you don't need to have that. And then you may have tension from doing exams, and then you learn to live with that stiffness, and then it builds up and builds up and builds up. And it's a little bit like a deck of cards. It builds up, but it's very fractious. It's very easy to just fall down. And that's the same thing with your iceberg syndrome, but the other way. And there you are. You have a condition. And so that's when we have to start your journey.